The Richard Roeper Show is brought to you by AmericanEagle.com Studios. The digital landscape is changing rapidly, and to compete in today's online business environment, you need an experienced partner. Since 1995, AmericanEagle.com has partnered with companies of all sizes, offering web design, web development, e-commerce, mobile apps, and digital marketing to drive your overall business's success, because they believe that today's online world is your online opportunity. Visit AmericanEagle.com to get started today. All right, let's jump right into it, guys. Entertainment news for you. This is from Variety, sometimes known as the Show Business Bible. Netflix and Chernin Entertainment have greenlit a drama series centered on the lives of the highly influential Kennedy family, Variety has learned. A Variety scoop titled Kennedy. There's a title for you. The show is based on the book JFK Coming of Age in the American Century, 1917 to 1956. Michael Fassbender is attached to play Joseph Kennedy Sr. He's the family patriarch. And they're going to have an 8-episode first season. I think the feeling here, the intent here, is to do something along the lines of an American version of The Crown, because you can go with the Kennedy family going all the way back to Joe Kennedy and how he made his money, and the bootlegging, and then all the horrible, and horrific, and in some cases life-changing and history-changing tragedies that the Kennedy family has suffered and endured, and all the scandals. There's a lot there. And just to say that it's going to be somewhat in the spirit of The Crown doesn't mean that the Kennedys are royalty, but they certainly are one of the most prominent American families in the history of this great country of ours. So what they're saying here, the official log line for the series says, Kennedy reveals the intimate lives, loves, rivalries, and tragedies that shaped the most iconic dynasty in modern history and helped create the world we live in today. Beginning in the 1930s, the first season will chart the improbable ascent of Joe Kennedy and Rose Kennedy and their 9 children, including rebellious second son Jack, who struggles to escape the shadow of his golden boy older brother. I'm all in for this, I have to say. And I guarantee you, you're going to hear from various members of the Kennedy family saying that this is exploiting our family and it's all fiction and none of that happened this way or that way, as you did with The Crown. And then we're going to keep on watching. And I love Fassbender. I think Michael Fassbender is just a great actor. I think he's a great choice to play Joseph Kennedy Sr. There will be a lot of other plum casting opportunities with the Kennedy series that's going to be coming to Netflix. I pulled up with the help of my friend Chad GPT. You guys know him. He's my sidekick, Chad. There have been so many, obviously, books and feature films and limited series about the Kennedy family, going all the way back to PT 109, which is a film I remember they showed us in school back in the day. And that was Cliff Robertson, who was really good as John F. Kennedy, the young John F. Kennedy. And it was about JFK was a World War II hero, commanding a patrol torpedo boat in the Solomon Islands. It was also, very much, I don't want to say sanitized, but it was, it was all pro JFK the hero. And, it came out while he was president. Sadly, only had a few more months to live. But it's a really strong film, PT 109. Check it out if you get a chance. Then we had, there weren't a lot of series and movies about the Kennedys throughout most of the 60s and 70s. But we had tons of books. But then in the 80s, it became a big thing. I remember the TV miniseries, also just called Kennedy, with Martin Sheen, who was so good as JFK, and Blair Brown, another terrific actress who did so many fine roles over the years. Continental Divide, loved her in that. She was Jackie Kennedy, and John Shea was RFK. Vincent Gardenia, J. Edgar Hoover. That was a 3-part miniseries. That was back in the day when we were really starting to get those, the late 70s and the early 80s, these television events on the networks, on NBC, ABC, CBS, where they would give us, these groundbreaking and often highly rated miniseries. Then you go through the 90s, there was a TV miniseries called The Kennedys of Massachusetts, with William Peterson as Joe Kennedy and Annette O'Toole as Rose Kennedy. So as you can tell, a lot of really fine actors have played various Kennedys and members of the extended family. Famously, of course, we had the film JFK, which was wildly entertaining, but complete bullshit. from the great Oliver Stone. It was this insane hallucinogenic look at the assassination of JFK and Jim Garrison, who was a real life district attorney who tried to disprove that Oswald acted alone. Listen, we're not going to get into whether or not he acted alone or not, but it's got an amazing cast. It's, to me, it's fantastical, and I think Oliver Stone meant it to be that way. But Kevin Costner as the DA, Jim Garrison, and you had Gary Oldman as Lee Harvey Oswald, and Joe Pesci and Tommy Lee Jones, all these Oscar winners in there. Jack Ruby, who killed, remember Jack Ruby, or you've read about or seen the footage. Jack Ruby killed Oswald in cold blood, which, just, of course, further fueled all the conspiracy theories. What the hell is going on here? Danny Aiello played Jack Ruby, who was an insane character on his own as material for fiction. We get into the 2000s, 13 Days, which was specifically about the Cuban Missile Crisis. Bruce Greenwood, terrific as JFK. We had an RFK TV movie that I don't remember, quite frankly, from 2002. Then you get into the 2010s. Greg Kinnear played JFK in the Kennedys miniseries on the History Channel with Katie Holmes as Jackie. And it just kept going on. I remember Natalie Portman played Jackie Kennedy. That was it was an interesting film because it was all about that week right after the assassination and what Jackie Kennedy was going through. Really well done. The Chappaquiddick scandal was revisited in Chappaquiddick, the film, which had Jason Clarke as Ted Kennedy. Really strong performance. And then just a couple of years ago, we had the Ana de Armas portrayal of Marilyn Monroe, but really kind of leaned into all the stories about the affairs between Marilyn Monroe and JFK and maybe RFK, whatever the case may be. So we have had dozens of books, movies, TV series about the Kennedys. I think the Netflix one is going to be a huge hit. I think there's still a huge appetite for all things Kennedy out there. All right. In other news, this is Entertainment Weekly reporting that the contention over Bad Bunny's impending performance at the 2026 Super Bowl. It roils on, says EW. There's now a petition out there to replace Bad Bunny with George Strait. That is the petition. It has more than 50,000 signatures, organized online. Urges the National Football League, this petition, to swap in country legend George Strait for the Latin rap phenom. The petition says that it's pivotal to remember the roots that have made American music what it is today. Blah, blah, blah. And here's what I'll say. George Strait, very popular, Entertainment Weekly points out, has had numerous number one singles over his 4-decade career, but he has not had a huge hit in more than a decade and has just a fraction of Bad Bunny's huge reach on social media and his insane sales. I just want to kind of look at this from the perspective of these entertainment petitions that we've had over the years. 50,000 signatures. There is less than 0.0001% chance that the Super Bowl people are going to say, "Oh, this petition has changed our mind. We're now going to bring in George Strait." First of all, 50,000 signatures, whatever. Who knows if they're all real? AI generated. Even if it's 50,000 people, 120 million people watched the Super Bowl last year. They're not going to change anything for a petition. And we've had these petitions over the years. Back in the day, you'd get letter writing campaigns, and sometimes they'd have some effectiveness. Back in the day, Star Trek, I know they got hundreds of thousands of letters, NBC back in the day, to keep Star Trek on the air. And they're always trying to save various shows, right? And in a lot of cases, there are a number of factors. You get the online petition, but you also get the fact that now there are a lot of other outlets. So you'll hear about shows that get an extra year on another network, get picked up somewhere else. And, Brooklyn Nine-Nine was one of those, right? Where they're like, we'll run another season of that. It's usually not just the petition. It's a bunch of other factors. And then there are a lot of online petitions that went nowhere. People were all outraged about Brie Larson being cast as Captain Marvel. So they started an online petition, recast, Captain Marvel, and they didn't. And Brie Larson was terrific in it, and the movie made tons of money. There were always these calls to various Snyder cuts, right? Of the director Zack Snyder, release the Snyder cut. People tried to get Ezra Miller, who has, certainly had his controversies and bad behavior, recast, but that didn't work. And they did release the movie, but the movie was shite. So that kind of worked itself out. These online petitions, I think my favorite one in terms of its ineffectiveness and stupidity was they wanted a lot of Game of Thrones fans hated the final season, right? And I understand some of the reaction to it because they squeezed in so much over the course of a relatively short season, and the ending was, if you don't satisfy anybody or don't tie up all the storylines like with The Sopranos, then you get a bunch of people saying, I wanted to know what happened. That left it open-ended. But if you tie it all up like they did in Game of Thrones, you'd be like, oh, that's too easy. They should have left it open-ended. So they wanted these fans, these hardcore fans, and they had like 2 million signatures on these online petitions to remake the final season of Game of Thrones. They were like, let's do it again. Forget those episodes. And I remember at the time saying, first of all, who's paying for that? It would be tens, if not more than $100 million to do that. Also, you have these actors and they're on shows. With Game of Thrones, you have a cast of 12 or 15 or 18 actors in a given season who are all given storylines. And what happens with actors, believe it or not, is after they finish work on one show or movie, they try to find work elsewhere. And they don't just all hang out in the Game of Thrones after party lounge for months, waiting to see if they're going to come back. So, the logistics of trying to get, first of all, nobody was going to do it. The creators weren't going to do it. The writers weren't going to do it. But even if they said, okay, let's get everybody back, you can't do that. So that one failed. I know there is talk about Turning Point USA, right, is going to do counter programming. And I don't know if they've gotten into a lot of the details about that as of this recording, but, have at it. That's the great thing about this country. You can counter program the Super Bowl halftime show. You could find other outlets. It's interesting because back in the day, in the 80s and 90s, the Super Bowl halftime shows were nothing like they are now. They didn't have a lot of superstars. It was often real cheesy. You get like Up With People and marching bands. And there was the infamous Indiana Jones spectacle where they had actors playing Indy. And then all of a sudden you'd have lounge singers showing up. They were forgettable. Sometimes they were amazingly terrible. So you had to watch it. But, there were some clever counter programming. MTV back in the 90s, they would do new episodes of Beavis and Butthead, which would get big numbers because people were like, I'm going to go watch Beavis and Butthead instead of this ridiculous halftime show. Remember the Lingerie Bowl? They had those pay-per-view broadcasts of exactly what that sounds like, women in lingerie playing football. Actually, the Lingerie Football League, I don't think that's still around. I don't see any lines on DraftKings or FanDuel or anything for the Lingerie Football League. The Puppy Bowl. Now, the Puppy Bowl, I think, airs like hours before the Super Bowl, but I think we had some kitten bowls and fish bowls and puppy bowl type things that would go at halftime for people who didn't want to see that year's particular entertainment. But the Super Bowl halftime show has become so huge with global superstars and legendary rock bands that there's not a lot of counter programming to it because you're not going to get the audience for it. So you can have at it, but it just nowadays doesn't seem like good strategy. All right, I'll tell you what, let's take a break and talk about Portillo's. It's like the old days this week when we're talking about new releases. I got 3 reviews for you, and they're all of movies that are playing in theaters. What a concept. All right, let's talk about Portillo's. Now, they, of course, are known for their famous Chicago hot dogs with all the freshest and tastiest ingredients, right down to that poppy seed bun. And then, of course, there's the legendary chocolate cake. If you're hearing this right now, that means you are alive and near a computer. That's all you got to be. That's all you need to go to Portillos.com and check out their entire selection of stuff you can get anywhere in these United States of America. Now, if you're blessed enough to live near a Portillo's, then you don't have to worry about getting online. Just go to the store, get the hot dogs, get the Italian beef, the salads, the chicken. They got it great. And then, of course, the chocolate cake, the single greatest item of all chocolate cake items in the history of humanity. You think I'm overstating that? I am not. Go and find out yourself. Go to the store, order online. Unbelievable, the chocolate cake. And they even have a cake shake. They take the cake, they smoosh it into a can with some super cool ingredients. I don't know. They do a bunch of stuff. There's ice cream. And all of a sudden, you got a chocolate cake shake. When it comes out of the blender, it's the best. It is a unique dining experience every time. Go to portillos.com, find a location near you. You can order online. Portillos, portillos.com.
I am close, closer than ever before, to achieve what no man has.
Victor, maybe it's time to let this go.
What manner of creature is that? What manner of devil made him? I did.
Okay, as I mentioned, we have 3 movies coming out this weekend, all being released in theaters only. Now, some of them will be coming to streaming services sooner rather than later, but they are all in theaters and they should be seen on the big screen, even the one I'm not particularly thrilled with. But it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to see this. The great Guillermo del Toro has directed Frankenstein, the latest adaptation of the legendary Mary Shelley novel. And huge anticipation for this because, we've got one of the world's best directors and this great cast. I have to say I was a little disappointed by Frankenstein. It's in that 2.5 to 3-star range for me. I'm on the fence. It's, as you'd expect, stunning, spectacular to look at, and fills the screen with incredible cinematography and just the right mix of, when you need the special effects, and the makeup is incredible. So in this version, we've got Oscar Isaac, one of my favorite actors, playing Dr. Victor Frankenstein, if you will. Jacob Elordi as the creature, as he's called, and Mia Goth as she's going to marry the brother of Dr. Frankenstein, and becomes kind of a Beauty and the Beast story with her and the creature. What I was surprised by was the hokiness and the corniness and sometimes even the cheesiness of the story structure and the dialogue. It's one of those classic things that, starts at the end. The creature is chasing down Dr. Victor Frankenstein, and they're on a ship that's stuck in the ice. Victor tells his story. He wants to tell the captain of the ship, "You have to hear my story." And then later on, the creature itself says, "Nah, that's not how it happened," and then tells their version of the story. That's pretty cheesy stuff, the flashback, but that's okay. The other thing, though, is, Jacob Elordi as Frankenstein. And the idea is, of course, that, crazy Doc Vic, dissembles Frankenstein from the body parts and brains and organs of a bunch of cadavers, right? And somehow, even with the makeup, it's like, wow, Frankenstein is in really good shape, the creature, and has abs of steel because it's Jacob Elordi, and it's just kind of ridiculous. And so we get into this thing where it's got elements of the Beauty and the Beast, and almost sort of plays like a superhero origin story too, though. Like, this is how Frankenstein came to be and what will happen next. And the decisions made by characters are ridiculous. The evolution and the growth of the creature. Again, it feels almost like a superhero. One minute it's, like Bucky Barnes or something, like, oh my gosh, look at this, magical. Now the creature is sensitive and reading and speaking beautiful English. And then the pseudo kind of romance that goes on. And in the dialogue, I was shocked at it very much. And I'm sure this was intentional, like kind of in keeping with the 1930s versions of this story, way over the top. It looks great. I know some folks are going to just absolutely love it, but I thought it was, it was too long. It was too obvious. It revels in the bloody violence, and that's fine. It's a violent story, but not the level of greatness I was hoping for. We also have Bugonia.
Greetings. Welcome to the headquarters of the human resistance.
Where's my hair?
Your hair has been destroyed to prevent you from contacting your ship.
What ship?
Your mothership?
Okay.
I've done a ton of research on this. You're killing our planet.
Alien fellas. I'm not an alien.
You're lying to me.
What's the difference? You know this is crazy. You know this is wrong.
which has Emma Stone, Jesse Plemons, great cast, fantastic, batshit crazy premise. Emma Stone plays Michelle Fuller. She's a CEO of the obligatory CEO of a giant pharma company. And Jesse Plemons plays a conspiracy theorist who sees, through everything, the messaging and Instagram posts and pictures, and it's all part of this vast conspiracy. So he kidnaps Emma Stone character, holds her hostage, and tries to get her to come clean and admit that she's an alien sent here to eradicate the species. Well, he's clearly nuts. And the back and forth between them is incredible as Emma Stone tries to figure out a way to get out of this. She's being held in a basement, chained, just horribly mistreated and abused, and is like, I can't confess to being an alien because that's insane. But then there's a moment in the film, this is not giving anything away, where you start to wonder, is this nutcase guy actually onto something here? Are there sinister forces at work? And I love the fact that it somehow has us believing, wait a minute, who's the crazy one here? Really well done. Darkly funny in cases, sometimes a little difficult to watch. Makes some pretty obvious points about the state of our world, but so do most of these message films. But I kind of dug Bugonia. Check it out. And then finally, you've been hearing about this one for months. A lot of anticipation, the latest musical biopic. I don't think we go a year now without having a well-known actor, a great actor playing a legendary figure from the world of entertainment. You go, and that's been around forever, but you go back to the 2000s, and a lot of times they get nominated for Oscars and often even win Oscars. So we've had, Jamie Foxx playing Ray, and Joaquin Phoenix and Reese Witherspoon in the Johnny Cash, June Carter Cash Walk the Line, and Rami Malek in Bohemian Rhapsody, and we just had Timothée Chalamet in the Bob Dylan biopic. And now we've got Springsteen, Deliver Me From Nowhere, with Jeremy Allen White, of course we all love on The Bear, before that Shameless, as Bruce Springsteen.
No, put Born USA on the shelf. I want this record to feel different.
The label, once you have your first top 10, they want 3 for the next.
Well, we've never been about singles, but the whole story. Just trying to break a little new ground.
We got a little time, just not a lot.
This is nuts, John. You know it, I know it, and deep inside, Bruce knows it.
Our man's on a rocket ship, and we don't want to miss that window. Radio can't play this.
In this office, my office, we believe in Bruce Springsteen.
Let's burn this place down, John.
Now, when these musical biopics, showbiz biopics, if you will, come out, they take one of two approaches. You get the sweeping, old-fashioned biopic that shows the star before they become a star and takes us through the whole arc, whether it's, it could be Elvis, it could be Judy Garland, whatever the case may be. And we see them, rising talent, that big break, superstar montage, the medley that we see of them getting #1 hits, and then we see the gold records and movie premieres and whirlwind romances and all of that. And then they bring in the makeup and all that kind of stuff to show them aging and meeting their demise, whether as far too young or older, whatever the case may be. Or you get the key chapter biopic, which I think we've seen more recently, which focuses on a specific period, pivotal moment, chapter in the life of the star that, that's what we got with the Bob Dylan pick, right? With a complete unknown, because Bob Dylan was a complete unknown at the beginning of the story and then becomes a known. And it's all about that, that period in Greenwich Village in the early 60s up to the mid 60s, and Dylan deciding to go electric. And then, of course, he had a career that goes on for 50 years after that. And it just captures that moment in time. That's what Deliver Me From Nowhere does. This is all about, it's based on a book about the making of Nebraska. So it's set in around 1982. Bruce Springsteen was already a big star. He had some big hits. He was hitting, Born to Run and things like that. He had gone from the Asbury Park, New Jersey Stone Pony cult legend to a mainstream star. Not yet a superstar, but starting to break through to the point where the record label was like, we are hearing singles on these albums and let's get them on the radio. And there were songs that were radio friendly. And in the midst of that, Springsteen decides to hole up in a rental home in New Jersey and go into a bedroom and get some rudimentary equipment and a cassette machine and record these haunting, stripped down folk influenced songs that were to become Nebraska. So it's all about the creative process. And of course, the record label and the executives saying, what he's doing, what now? And I tell you this, Jeremy Allen White looks nothing like Bruce Springsteen. He does a really good job of sounding like Springsteen. The language, the dialogue, there's kind of in and out, but the musical performances are amazing on stage and also in the recording sessions. And that's all Jeremy. He dedicated himself to this, just like Timothée Chalamet did. And they're not doing impersonations. They're doing more than that, of course. They're just kind of capturing the character. Jeremy Strong, one of our best actors, is John Landau, who is Springsteen's longtime manager. Who started as a rock journalist and famously wrote, I have seen the future of rock and roll, and his name is Bruce Springsteen, and then became Bruce's best friend and confidant and manager. So it focuses on that, and the recording sessions are fascinating. There's a romance with a character, a single mom played by Odessa Young, and it's a composite character, as they often do with these types of films. And it's to illustrate that while Bruce Springsteen was trying to come to terms with his feelings, and there's a lot about his past and his abusive father and him trying to escape that cycle and not believing in himself. So he had a series actually of romances that petered out because he couldn't commit, but they put it all into one composite character. It does really follow the standard slice of life biopic, sometimes to the point of being, again, a little bit almost corny. Whenever you get that moment in the biopic where the lead sees the younger version of himself, the actor, and they actually look at each other across the crowded room or wherever the case may be, and the younger version looks at the current version as if to say, yeah, we're going to go through a lot, but we'll be okay. There's a lot of that. But the editing is really good. We have just the right sprinkling of flashbacks to Bruce growing up in New Jersey in the 50s, and then the current state, that I said is set. And it really captures that kind of that early 80s vibe of the music industry. Jeremy Allen White is terrific. So it's more in the 3-star range for Springsteen, Deliver Me From Nowhere, but really well done. And I really admire the film for leaning into and addressing Bruce Springsteen's battles with anxiety and depression, which are very real, and he has talked a lot about, which was almost crippling to him at that point in his life. And you got to remember, again, in the early 80s, there's a lot of, we didn't talk about that as much as we do today. So he dealt with it on his own for as long as he could before getting the help he needed. And that came out in the music of Nebraska, but also, Bruce, among many other, high profile figures, talking and dealing with that. And the movie that talks about that is a really good thing. All right, that's going to do it for this week's podcast. Thanks for listening, guys, and we will talk soon.